Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to another Addicted Fishing video. Today, we're gonna take you by the hand and show you absolutely everything you need to know to be able to go out and catch a salmon in the fall time, or in the springtime, or anytime. We're gonna show you guys some tips, some tricks, some secrets, and try to give you a little more information on how to go out and catch these beautiful fish. And it's gonna be a very informative and awesome episode today, so stick around. Let's go get a fish. So the method we're gonna start off with teaching today is everybody's favorite in fall, and that is the twitching. What I have here is an 𝗛𝗘𝗟𝗣 Guide Pro twitching rod, and the length of this thing is 7.5 feet. It is an 8 to 15 pound line rating and a 1/4 to 3/4 ounce lure rating. The most important part of this rod setup is the fact that it's short, and it is a very fast action rod. Fast action means very stiff. A slow action rod is a very flimsy rod, like a bobber rod. But for a twitching jig and something like this that you really want to be able to feel the end of your line well and quickly, you want that 7'6" line rating. And the stiffness of the 8 to 15 pound is very imperative. What I have on here is an 𝗛𝗘𝗟𝗣 𝗪𝗛𝗏 reel. Our favorite rods are 𝗪𝗛𝗏. You guys can use anything you want for this. But my main point of the rod setup for the twitching is that it is short, something under 8.5 feet long. So I have the 7'6" rod, that's perfect. I have the 4000 series reel. 3000 series work a little bit better for a twitching rod, but I like to have a little bit of extra line on here, especially when I might be catching some fall Chinook, which are gonna be a lot bigger than our fall coho. I have a 30-pound Addicted Enforcer braid on here. I love this stuff because it's very high visibility, and you can actually see it going through the water and tell right where your presentation is the whole time you're twitching. I tie a 15-foot bumper on the end of this, or 10-foot bumper, of 15-pound fluorocarbon line. Those two lines are connected by a blood knot, which I'll show you guys really quick on camera here. A blood knot or a uni knot or a crazy Alberto knot. There's a few different methods to connect that 30-pound braided line to your fluorocarbon. And the 30-pound line rating is very important in my mind because you want something that's gonna cut through the water column. If you have too heavy of line, if you have a 40, 50-pound test, it's gonna wanna float, and it's gonna pull you up and off the bottom and not allow your presentation to be down in front of those fish as well as it will with a 30-pound line. So to start my blood knot, I'm gonna lay both lines as the necks. I'm gonna cross them straight across just like this, leaving about 6 inches of tag on each side. I'm gonna take with my middle finger and my ring finger and wrap this thing around there 7 times. This is the braided line going onto the fluorocarbon line. I'm gonna take that whole operation that I just did, put both lines straight up, wrap my braided back and in between my fluoro and my braid again, and do the same thing with my fluorocarbon line. 7 wraps. And you'll see this hole that we've created right in the middle of this whole deal. This is the line where my braided line is coming through the other end. I'm gonna put that right through the hole there, kind of pull it tight, and then I'm gonna grab both ends of the line and slowly pull together. Get a little wet, and bam. We have our blood knot. The way you know you did this knot right is that both lines come out opposite ends. Give it a nice little security check. Looks good to me. And then we'll trim our tag ends. Now when picking out your jig, there's about 3 different things you want to know. I have a 1 ounce on here right now because I'm fishing deep water. The other ratings are a 3/4 ounce and a 1/2 ounce. And with our addicted tail-out twitchers, which are very, very, very effective, I like to use each and every one of these for a different situation. If you're fishing with a 1/2 ounce, odds are you're in very shallow water or very slow water. So if I'm fishing a back slough in the river where there's no current, I'm gonna use something like this because it falls slower and it's not gonna get snagged on the bottom, and it's gonna get more of a presentation in front of those fish. If I'm fishing very, very shallow water and I'm jigging in fast speed water, which we're gonna show you all these methods here in just a minute, I'm gonna want something that's lighter and stays up off the bottom so that I'm not snagging quite as much. With the 3/4 ounce jig, it's more of the all around. I'm gonna use this in anywhere from 5 to 10 feet of water. I can use it in shallow water, I can use it in fast, I can use it in slow. It is truly the most versatile, in my opinion, of all the tail out twitching jigs, the 3/4 ounce. And then going up to the 1 ounce is anything that I'm fishing that's gonna be about 10 to 15 to 30 feet deep. That's pretty much the only time, or extremely fast, rapidy water. That's gonna be the only time I wanna go up to the 1 ounce. So having all 3 is very important. It allows you to be more versatile and fish more of the river. And color really comes down to personal preference. My favorite's the Nightmare, others are the pink head, purple body, others are the Seahawk. Everybody has their favorite color of jig, but make sure you just adapt it to the watercolor that you're fishing. I like a Nightmare style of jig or a very bright jig like this if the water's very dirty. If we have clear water and the fish can see a long ways, I like to go with more of a purple or a lighter color that's not as intrusive to those fish. So having all 3 and having multiple colors is very important. Now let's show you how to fish it. And the first step for catching more fish in the fall is to make sure you have your Willy Wallaby licorice. Wallaby. Oh, they're in here, everyone. So you can see as I'm doing this twitch, like I said before, you want to let that jig fall farther than you make it rise. All I'm doing here is I'm making contact with my jig, and then I'm throwing that little whip out in front of me. I'm not just lowering my tip straight down, because that'll cause a lot of different backlashes and tip wraps, and it'll be very annoying for you guys. So nice short little jerk. And I'm going from my belly button about up to my nose. You can see I'm not going over my head. I'm keeping that thing nice and close to the water, and I'm throwing that line back down river after every single time I twitch up. And that's gonna be key for getting that proper presentation, because you want that jig to go up and then fall twice as far as it went up. And that's what's gonna get those fish to go on it. These fish want something that's falling in front of their face. So if it's constantly going up towards the surface, by the case of jigging and reeling, that jig's gonna always continuously move its way towards the surface of the water, which is not what we want for salmon fishing. Granted, we are fishing out of the boat right now, so my main point I wanna make is the fact that we're fishing moving current, which is relative whether you're on the bank or not. And you guys can see through my cast here, I'm not reeling at all. I'm using a 3/4 ounce jig. It's 5.5 feet underneath us here, and I'm literally not reeling once or twice on the sequence of my cast. And the reason for that is because I have that current pulling against my jig. That resistance of the water on my line is gonna keep that jig going towards the surface. So in that case, because it's swinging, because I have enough depth, and because I have that tension on my line, I do not even need to reel up my slack as that thing goes through that water column. So in a minute here, we'll go to a different hole where it's slack water, and we'll be fishing, or we're gonna be doing our consistent reeling in between each jig, and I'll get you guys that tempo and allow you to be able to see a little bit of my timing on how I'm jigging. But for the instance of fishing this moving water, even still haven't reeled this whole cast. I'm letting that jig swing, I'm letting it stay right in front of those fish for as long as possible, and I'm jigging it up and down right in that strike zone in front of them. So now what I'm gonna do, because I'm getting into a deeper part of the fishing hole, is I'm gonna switch to a 1 ounce jig. And that's gonna allow me to get down faster. We have a hole that's over about 12 feet deep. And my methodology, but like I said earlier, and going over my jigs, my methodology is to go about every 10 feet you add a 1/2 ounce. So we have or a 1/4 ounce. We have the 1/2 ounce jig, which is good for slow and not moving water, like I said. We have the 3/4, which is a great all around. But then you switch to the 1 ounce when you wanna fish deep or very fast water. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm gonna switch to the 1 ounce, and I'm gonna get it down here into this deeper tail out. You see I have the same tempo. I have the moving water, so I'm still not reeling, but that 1 ouncer is allowing me to get a little bit deeper down in this hole. I'm gonna search for bottom again, found it again, and I'm gonna keep that rhythm going. About a jig every 2 seconds. Oh God, look at them all. And you can see here, using our side imaging on our Humminbird depth finder really cuts out the guesswork. Each one of these black spots right here is a fish. So it's telling me, other than the fact that the fish are rolling and they're showing themselves, in the boat situation where I have my depth finder, having a unit like this Helix 12 is absolutely game changing, because you can actually definitively see whether or not you're fishing on top of fish, which allows you to change up tactics, change up lures, or completely change areas whether or not the fish are even there. So I must say, Humminbird, you're doing a great job, and this is an incredible tool to have out here on the water. I got a fish, it was just sitting there. Oh, I got a fish. I took all technique out of this, everyone. I made that jig come all the way back behind us. It finally got directly back behind the boat. It's jigging up and down, still not reeling, and got our first fish on of the day. Feels like a Chinook. Feels like a big one. That is the cool part about the twitching and any of these methods that we're showing you here today. It works for every single species. You don't have to completely change your setups to be targeting different species, other than maybe the pound test rating of your leaders. Oh wow, it's a big one. Oh, it just came off. Bummer. But let it be said, the twitching jig works. All right, everybody, so now I'm gonna show you how to fish slow water. We went through some like basic walking speed water just a second ago. It was about 6 to 12 feet deep, so I was going with that 3/4 ounce. I'm switching to the 1 ounce now because we're in 8 feet deep underneath us. Out in the middle, it's about 15 feet. So I'm gonna go with a heavier jig. Hold on, this is a real life kind of video, guys. We're gonna crash. So I'm gonna go with the heavier jig, and I'm gonna show you the technique on fishing that slower water, which is gonna consist of more reeling and a lot more action on the jig. So I'm gonna cast out here. Usually never really wanna cast, especially a heavy jig, very far upriver. So I'm gonna cast 90 degrees to the other bank. And the way I'm gonna find bottom is by holding my line tight. One thing I see people do that's improper all the time is they cast out and they let their line go slack and try to guess where the bottom is. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna cast out, it's gonna hit the water, I'm gonna hold my line tight against that jig until I see the thump and watch where my line goes slack. Thunk, just hit bottom. And then I'm gonna start to continue my jig. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm jigging about every 2 seconds once again. I'm going up to my nose and I'm letting it fall, but then I'm reeling in the slack after it's already fallen. So I'm gonna reel, but still lower my tip enough to let that jig fall towards the bottom. So I'm jigging up, letting it fall, reeling once. Jigging it up, letting it fall, reeling once. And by that method, you're gonna allow that thing to go through the strike zone and not ever get stuck on the bottom because you're bringing in that line of which it would normally get it snagged. So let's try that again. I'm gonna hold my line tight, wait for it to hit bottom, thunk, there's bottom. So jig up, reel twice. Jig up, let fall, reel twice. Jig up, let it fall, reel twice. It's like a beat. Jig it up, let it fall, reel twice. Sing it with me, everybody. Jig it up, let it fall, reel twice. Well, I really hope that first bit of twitching is going to help you guys. If you have any questions or comments or anything, comment below and we can answer your questions, especially if it comes to fishing techniques and stuff. Other than that, we do have a lot of tutorials on the page here on Addicted Fishing that really break down each single one of these methods. So go back and check that out, rewatch this one, and on to the next thing. What we're going to talk about next is one of my very favorite and maybe one of the most versatile styles of fishing that there are, and that is the Brad's Wiggler. These things work great for Chinook, coho, and steelhead. Pretty much anything will bite them, whether it's a trout or any of the 3 species that I just named off. The rod I'm going to use for this is the Guide Select Pro 9-foot, 8 to 17 pound rod. That 9-foot is beautiful for this. 9 to 10 foot rod is going to be really great for this because you want to be able to cast this thing a long ways. These things are fairly heavy. They're probably about a ½ ounce, but having a nice long flimsy rod like this one here, it has that great backbone and it has a really soft tip, so that I can use this rod to sling these things out there as far as I want to get them. Again, I'm going with a 4000 series reel. I have my 30-pound Addicted Enforcer braid once again. Again, that 30-pound really helps you cast a long ways. It goes through the guides a lot nicer and it comes off the spool really nice. Same thing with the bumper. I'm gonna do 10 feet of a 15-pound fluorocarbon bumper, tied together again with that blood knot, and then down to my Brad's Wiggler. You can see what I've done here, and this is fairly unique. I prefer to run 1 hook on these. These things come with 2 double treble hooks. When you pull them right out of the box, this is what they're gonna look like. This one's a little bit smaller version, but you guys get the gist. I like to take that front hook off all the time. For some reason, this is a personal preference. It's not recommended by the dealer or anything like that, but I like to take that front hook off because I feel like those hooks work against each other and really essentially pull the other hook out. I seem to lose a lot more fish with that double treble. So I go with a single 2/0 Mustad Siwash hook on the end here. And that seems to work a lot better for me than using 2 treble hooks, or even I'll run just a single treble hook if you don't have these available to you, but there we go. There's many different colors of these wigglers, and it's good to have them all. You can see I have a range of colors. I got my bright oranges, I got my dark purples, I got green, I got orange again, I got chartreuse, and all through the spectrum of colors, really. Sometimes it can be extremely important to be having the right color on when fishing for these fish. So that being said, let's go cast around, show you how to fish them. Sometimes the most important part of fishing a Brad's Wiggler is making sure that it's tuned. And a lot of people don't know this. As soon as it comes out of the box, you should always check. If you cast your Wiggler out right out of the box and it starts swimming left or right, that's because you need to tune that plug. What I mean by tuned is that it swims in a straight line. So I'm gonna show you right here. But what I mean by this is that this Wiggler goes in a straight line. You can see how it's diving straight down and swimming in a straight direction. If it's not tuned, it'll pull off to one side, left or the right. And so to make that adjustment, to tune that plug, you're gonna move this little piece right here. You can see the eye that this connects to. You're either gonna take your pliers, push it left. You can see this one I kind of cocked off to the side a little bit to the right, and that's because my plug was swimming the wrong direction. So I have it bent to the right. If that doesn't work, you take your pliers and push against this piece right here and bend it back the other way. So there's multiple different types of water that you can fish a Wiggler in. You can fish them on anchor in a boat, which we'll do a little bit later in this tutorial. You can cast them in fast water and swing them across like a fly or a spinner, or you can fish frog water like we're about to right now. That's one of my very favorite ways to fish them, is anything from about 8 to 15 to 20 feet deep that has 0 moving current, just like this spot right here. And it's one of the easiest methods of fishing, I must say, because it's just a cast and a retrieve. You want to give a good speed, a good tempo to that thing swimming across, so that that Wiggler is whizzing by those fish, getting down and deep into the strike zone, and allowing them to see it and follow it and strike at it. So again, my method for fishing this hole is I'm starting to the right and slowly working my way to the left, making sure to cover the water columns and get the full amount of the whole fish. It's very, very crucial at times to be casting all over the place, especially on a schooling fish like this. And one thing I must say is very imperative when fishing a wiggler is to fish it all the way back to the boat or all the way to the shore. So many times I see these fish follow the wiggler all the way back to the boat and hit it right at the rod tip at the very end of your trip. Okay, now that we've covered the wigglers, we're going to talk about one of my very favorite ways to catch a fish, and that's with the old trusty spinner. My rod setup and choice is going to be the exact same as what we just used for the wiggler, but just with a little bit something different at the end. There's 3 different kinds of spinners you guys should know about. The first one is the bell-bodied spinner. The bell-bodied spinner is used in fast water, anything from about 3 to 5 feet deep, and with a lot of current. The reason I like to choose that is because it has a large surface area on the body of that spinner, which carries it through that fast current and allows it not to get snagged as much. The second type of spinner is a torpedo bodied spinner. These work really great anything from 6 to 10 feet deep with a really good walking speed. They cut through the water nicely, so it allows you to get down in front of the fish quicker and fish more effectively in deeper water. The third spinner I would call a lead bodied spinner, and this one is very, very heavy. It weighs about a ½ ounce, and the only time I'm going to use something like this is in very deep water, extremely fast water, or anywhere that I really need to get down towards the bottom very quickly and get in front of those fish before it moves very far downriver. What you always want to do with a spinner, just like I preach with every one of these methods, is you want to start close, you want to work to the middle, and then you want to go far. You can fish spinners from a boat, from a bank, anywhere that you want, as long as you effectively use that grid pattern and cover as much water as you possibly can. So what I'm going to do, I'm looking at my water here, I'm going to use my 45s once again. I'm going to cast 45 degrees upriver, fish my lure down through the water column to about 45 degrees downriver, and then I'm going to bring it back in. So here I go. I'm going to go 45 degrees, no, just kidding. I'm going to go 45 degrees upriver. As soon as that hits the water, I'm going to engage my blade, get it spinning, and I'm going to keep my tip very low. You'll notice how I'm actually following my spinner with my rod tip the whole time. The key to this is if you're pointing your rod tip down towards the water and making that blade spin, it's going to continuously fall down towards the bottom of the river. If you lift it up to the surface, it's going to come to the surface. That spinner blade is going to follow wherever you point your rod tip. So that being said, I cast up, I immediately bring my line tight, keep my tip low as that thing works down to the bottom, and as long as that blade is spinning, I'm barely reeling. You can notice how I'm only reeling a couple cranks every few seconds just to make up for that water where that blade's not spinning. Now that I made my close cast, I'm going to go to the middle. Tip low, following my spinner, and working that thing down towards the bottom of the river. As soon as I feel bottom or I feel a fish, I'm just going to simply lift up. Now that I made that middle cast, let's go for the far cast. There it is. I'm going to wait till I feel bottom by holding my line tight. There it is. I'm going to reel that spinner blade tight, following it with my rod tip again the whole way, pointing down and working that spinner down towards the bottom of the river. You can see how much that rod tip is thumping with that spinner blade spinning. As long as I see that, I know I don't have to reel any faster or any slower. So one more long cast. Normally, after I've made my first, second, and third round of casts, I'm going to slowly work my way down in the hole. Again, covering that hole like a grid pattern. Close, middle, far, 2 steps. Close, middle, far, 2 steps until I'm down into the end of the tail out and have covered all the available water I have in front of me. Pardon my English, everybody. But I just lost one. Now with that happening brings up my last and final point about hooking fish on a spinner. The best thing to do is the least. Less is more when it comes to setting hook on a spinner. I find I land 10 times more fish if I don't actually pull up and set the hook like I just did there on camera. What happens is if that fish can swim up to your lure and properly go up and grab that lure and it turns away with it, it automatically sets that hook in the side of that fish's mouth and gets as much hook gap into the side of that fish's mouth as possible, rather than the fish grabbing and then me yanking and only hooking the edge of its lips. So let it be said, less is more. Less hook set, reel into the fish, and then slowly lift while reeling as that fish starts to turn away with your spinner. All right, everybody, now last but not least, is the bobber fishing. One of my very favorite ways to fish, and probably one of the most important to know. So I'm gonna start with my setup, and then I'm gonna show you guys some of the very, very key things that you need to do to become a better bobber fisherman to catch a salmon. So what I have here first is a Okuma Guide Select Pro, once again, GSP 998-17. A lot longer rod is going to help you a ton in this situation. You want something that's over 9 feet long and has a pretty light, flexible tip. I go with this 8 to 17 pound rod just because it can handle a Chinook, and it can handle a coho, and it can handle a steelhead. The 6 to 12 model is a great rod, but sometimes for a big fall Chinook it's a little bit under gunny. I have the same C40 𝗪𝗪, and on this I have 65 pound test. The reason I have such a heavy line is because that line's going to float on the surface of the water and not allow any drag so that I can get that perfect drift. So that's why I go with a super heavy line, so it almost acts like a fly line and sits up on the surface and allows me to mend my line really easily. On this I have a 15 pound fluorocarbon bumper, and that's just so I can slide easily up and down and those fish don't see my line quite as much, because you have the chance of fish seeing your line a lot more if you tie your braid straight to that barrel swivel and ultimately your weight. So adding a fluorocarbon bumper can help you be stealthy and allow you to get a lot better presentation. What I have on here is a 1 ounce bobber, and this is a pretty good all around. You can go with lighter bobbers, you can go with 1/2 ounce, 3/4, 1 ounce, you can even go up to 2 ounce, but it's all gonna depend on how deep of water that you're fishing. If you're fishing anything over 15 to 20 feet deep, you're gonna wanna go with at least a 1 ounce bobber up to a 2 or a 3. If you're fishing very small creeks, you wanna go with either a addicted fixed float or some sort of 1/2 ounce bobber. What I've done here is I've actually put more weight on than what my bobber allows. This is a 1 ounce bobber, and I have 1.5 ounces of weight on. And that's just because when those fish bite my bait, they're gonna grab, pull down, and barely feel that bobber as they swim off with that bait of eggs. What I've done at the end here is 6 feet of 12 pound test and a split shot crimped on my line right in the middle to help get that bait down on the bottom. On the end of this, I have a size 2 Mustad fine wire ultra point hook. And I like this because it floats very well with the eggs and keeps it up off the bottom. So with that being said, let's get down to the eggs. Now this is some salmon roe that I've cured with Pro Cure. Any sort of bait works really good as long as you can find some that's gonna stay on your hook well and allow you to get down in front of those fish and serve the best chance of actually catching one. I like to always get some sort of secondary bait to go on my hook as well. And this is what we call sand shrimp. You can use coon shrimp, you can use sand shrimp, you can use any kind of prawn. Anything to add a little extra scent to your bait can always help. And really it's just another element you can add to your bait to up your success rate on catching fish. There you go. You can see how I went with a pretty small bait. I like to either go with something that's around like a nickel size up to about a silver dollar, all the way up to like a golf ball size. Depending on the dirtiness of water, how turbid your water is, and how high it is will depict how big you want your bait. But we have some pretty clear water here today, so I'm going with a little bit smaller bait. Okay, now it's time to get down to the nitty gritty, and it's actually fishing this presentation. What's very important when you're fishing a bobber setup is your line management and how you effectively break down the hole. I'm always gonna start close, then I'm gonna cast to the middle, and then I'm gonna cast far. Casting too far on the first cast can really make you miss a lot of fish that might be swimming in between. So right here I have what I would call a perfect bobber run. It's about walking speed, goes down river, bends to the right, hits a wall, and pushes down towards the tail out. It's great water for bobber fishing because it's relatively the same depth all the way through the hole. So I set my bobber depth by using these little bobber stops, which I attach to that fluorocarbon line. A lot of these will actually come with the bobber, and this is how you're gonna judge your depth. So I'm gonna take my line. I'm guessing this hole is probably about 4 to 5 feet on the other side. I go to about 4 feet. Make sure my split shot's midway through my line. And I'm gonna start on the closest inside path that I can possibly find. As you see, this river bends, pushes towards me, so I'm gonna make a nice cast over here. Now line management can be very key when you're fishing this bobber. As you can see, we have multiple different currents. We have slow current inside, we have medium current out in the middle, and we have fast current on the far side. So, oh, this might be a bite. Whoa, that was fishy. We're gonna throw this back out there now. I always like to start my cast at about 45 degrees upriver and work it to a 45-degree angle down. That way you're getting a good hook set and you're able to manage your line properly all the way through the drift. Oh, what the hell? We're getting tapas, we're getting bites. So mending your line is what's the most important part of getting a perfect drift when you're bobber fishing. What I like to do is I always like to say if you mend twice properly during your drift, you're gonna get that perfect drift. Really what it is by landing your presentation at 45 degrees, letting that belly form, which is the belly of line that goes down below your bobber, and then mending that line periodically at the first third and the 3/4 of your drift, that allows you to get a straight dead drift without a lot of line being grabbed by the water and inflicting how much your bobber is floating. You want your bobber to go the exact same speed as the current with your bait placed down below it, slowly moving through that water column. And to do so, you want to keep your rod directly straight up and down, which is going to keep the most line off of the water. And at your first third of the drift, you lift high in the air, throw your line all the way to the left of the bobber, and then let it keep floating downriver properly with the current. And now that my bobber's reached the 3/4 of the drift, I'm going to do the exact same motion. Also, one thing that can help a lot is as you make that close middle to far casting sequence, you start slowly working your bobber depth deeper with each cast until you find bottom or ultimately find a fish. Woohoo! Way to go, Franco! See? A couple of tips will help you catch a fish. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The proof is in the pudding and in the eggs. Beautiful little Chinook salmon. All right, everybody, there it is. That's how you go out and catch a salmon. I really hope this video helped you guys out, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. And if you guys like this video, go down and smash that like button for us so this video gets shared out there and can help more people go out and enjoy the outdoors. If you guys want to see more informative videos just like you saw here today, go up here and click this link to this next video. Go down here, hit subscribe, turn those bells on. Please give this video a thumbs up and comment below, and you can be the comment of the day, just like this person right here. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. You stay fishy. We'll see you out there.